Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a massive, almost invisible global economic shift and connecting it directly to what's happening right inside your personal retirement account. We're zooming all the way in from the macro to the micro. And you're definitely going to want to stick around for this because what we're talking about today, it mathematically guarantees a change to your future wallet.
So, is demographic collapse actually our biggest threat? We've weathered financial crashes, right? We've been through global pandemics, and the world just keeps on spinning. But falling birth rates? That's not just a temporary blip. We are looking at a full-on, era-defining crisis that's literally going to reshape how we live, work, and retire for the next century.
Okay, let's dive into this. A lot of folks out there just assume the global population is booming uncontrollably. But the reality? The global peak for human births actually happened over a decade ago, back in 2012. Think of the global population like a massive freight train. In 2012, humanity basically slammed on the brakes. Sure, we're still rolling forward on momentum, but we are slowing down fast, and soon we're going straight into reverse.
Here's our agenda. First, the 2050 demographic winter. Then, why productivity cannot save us, followed by how emerging markets stagnate early. After that, we'll look at subsidies that actually work, the strain on our retirement systems, and finally, the new rules for your retirement.
Section 1. The 2050 Demographic Winter. A mathematical certainty.
And this isn't just a rich country problem either. Take a look at India. Back in 1997, there were 14 young workers to support every single retiree. Fast forward to 2050, and that number is projected to plummet to fewer than 5. Globally, over the next 25 years, the ratio of workers to retirees is set to drop by more than half. The fundamental engine of economic growth, which is human labor, is shrinking everywhere, all at once. Now, the consequences this has for the retirement system are absolutely staggering. In the U.S., by 2050, the consumption deficit of the elderly, basically the money they need to live but haven't saved, which young people have to cover, is going to consume 35% of all workers' income. In some parts of Asia, that could even hit 50%. Just imagine half of your paycheck going strictly to sustain the previous generation. It is a total rewiring of wealth transfer.
Section 2. Why productivity cannot save us, or the myth of working smarter.
Broadly speaking, economic growth really just relies on 3 levers: the sheer number of workers, the hours worked per person, and the productivity per hour. Now, with a demographic collapse, we're obviously losing the number of workers. We're also losing total hours worked because older populations naturally and rightfully work fewer hours. So mathematically, that leaves productivity as our one and only hope to pay off public debt and actually fund these aging pensions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the math required to pull that off is practically impossible. To maintain our current economic growth, rich countries would have to multiply their productivity growth by 2 to 4 times starting today and sustain that all the way out to 2050. The grim reality? Global productivity growth is actually in free fall. It's growing at half the rate it did in previous decades. Instead of accelerating to meet the challenge, the engine is completely sputtering out.
And why is productivity falling? Well, an aging population literally stifles innovation. Young people are the ones who take risks, older populations generally seek out stability. That's exactly why the rate of new business creation in the US has literally halved since the 1970s. Now, you might be thinking, hey, artificial intelligence will fix this. But remember, the adoption of the internet was a massive paradigm shift, and broader productivity still slowed down. AI and immigration might help on the margins, sure, but they simply cannot bridge a demographic gap this incredibly wide.
Section 3. Emerging markets stagnate early. A massive race against time.
To put this into perspective, countries like India are projected to hit these crushing dependency ratios while their GDP per capita is only sitting around $10,000. What does that mean? It means their economies are going to completely stagnate long before they ever reach the wealth standards of the US or Europe. They are going to grow old before they get rich. This locks millions into poverty and entirely rewrites our geopolitical future.
Section 4. Subsidies. What actually works when fixing the root cause?
So, throwing money at births doesn't really work. Take Hungary, for example. They spend a massive 5% of their entire GDP on birth rate subsidies. And the result? Virtually 0 new births. It mostly just shifts the timing for couples who are already planning to have kids anyway. The data shows us that marriage-focused incentives are vastly superior. See, the modern birth decline isn't just families choosing to have fewer kids. It's driven by couples failing to form in the first place. Incentivizing stable couple formation hits the actual root cause of this demographic winter.
So the crucial point is Section 5, the retirement system strain, moving from the macro down to the micro.
I want you to consider this staggering reality. More than 56 million people in the workforce today are without access to a retirement plan at their job. We're talking gig workers, freelancers, small business employees. They're completely locked out of the traditional 401k system. As the macro demographic system cracks, this gaping hole in the safety net paves the way for some drastic new policies designed to force individual savings.
Which brings us to Section 6, new rules for your retirement, the Trump IRA and privatization.
Starting in 2027, the government is introducing a savers match. Here's how it works. If you meet the income limits, which are capped at $20,500 for a single person or $41,000 for a married couple, and you manage to save your first $2,000, the government essentially hands you a 50% return right out of the gate. They will deposit a $1,000 match directly into your account. It's an absolutely unprecedented effort to jumpstart retirement accounts for lower-income earners.
And to make this happen, a government-vetted marketplace, TrumpIRA.gov, mandates that institutions charge total fees of 0.15% or less. It's designed to be a one-stop, low-cost shop for gig workers and freelancers. Now, just to remain completely impartial here, critics do point out a pretty glaring issue. If you only make $20,000 a year, it's incredibly difficult to find $2,000 in spare cash to secure that match in the first place. So the incentive is definitely there, but the execution might leave a lot of folks behind.
But there is another major shift happening to traditional 401ks. Soon, alternative investments like private equity, private credit, and even digital assets like crypto could be allowed right in your account. The argument for this? It democratizes investing. It gives regular workers access to the massive upside deals that billionaires like Peter Thiel use. The flip side, though, is drastically increased risk. Unlike a transparent, low-cost index fund, these private investments are opaque, they carry huge fees, and they bring the very real potential for a total loss of your savings. You're basically trading transparency and liquidity for the chance at a much higher yield.
And that brings us to the ultimate question. The demographics of our world are fundamentally changing. Productivity is slowing down, and governments are pivoting the responsibility of retirement squarely onto your shoulders, opening up new avenues that are both highly rewarding and extremely risky. So, as the global economy ages, how are you protecting your future? Because relying on the old system, well, that's simply no longer an option. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.